New poll by the Countryside Alliance says BBC programmes about the British countryside, which Tim Montgomery was just reflecting on a moment ago, programmes like The Archers, Springwatch and Countryfile do not accurately reflect realities of rural Britain. 90% of members surveyed said Springwatch and Autumnwatch were amongst the worst shows for representing rural issues, while two-thirds of respondents said that the licence fee ought to be scrapped entirely. Let's turn to the Chief Executive of the Countryside Alliance, and that is Tim Bonner. Tim, welcome to you, and thanks for your time. Appreciate it. There's a lot of disgruntlement with the depiction of the countryside in the countryside.
Yeah, and Tim Montgomery's piece there absolutely explained why. We have great Sunday night programming, and let's be clear, there's not a problem with it. Countryfile is watched by millions of people, but it is essentially a chocolate box image of the countryside. It's light viewing for a Sunday night. It's not about the serious issues that fundamentally affect rural communities and their lives, the sort of things Tim was talking about, the affordable housing, mental health issues in the countryside. These critical issues which are affecting people across the countryside every day. And the question is not, should there not be a Countryfile? Of course there should be, but what is the BBC doing to reflect the real lives of rural people, the real issues that are affecting them on a week-to-week, month-by-month basis? And we don't see our lives reflected on the BBC. That's it, frankly. And beyond that, there is a fundamental issue about the misrepresentation of many of the controversial issues, which we have to deal with as we manage the countryside.
Tim, let's conduct a little thought experiment, and let's do what they do every Christmas on Radio 4's Today programme. They hold a guest editor who gets to shift the dial and make the programme in their own image. If you were editing Countryfile for one episode, what would be in it?
We would certainly
not Chris
be
Packham.
Exploring. No, not. And thankfully, Chris Packham's not on Countryfile very often. But it's sort of the point, but isn't the point, Colin? Because I wouldn't want to inflict some of this heavyweight stuff on a Sunday evening audience, which wants to see. We want the beautiful bits of the countryside, all the benefits of it promoted properly, and Countryfile does that wonderfully. But what I'd actually want, not answering your question, but answering the way I want, is a different programme, a programme which does represent my members, the farmers, the working people of the countryside out there, which reflects their issues, which touches on really difficult stuff. I mean, suicide rates among farmers, only doctors kill themselves more often than farmers. These are serious issues. We've got huge problems with affordable housing across large areas of the countryside, made even worse, sadly, by the pandemic and the flight from the cities for people who are looking to come and live in the countryside. How can you make a living?
Tim, just on that point, you use the word escapism, the chocolate box escapism. Is that not part of the problem here? It's not just people living in inner cities who are switching on Countryfile for a dose of that rural escapism. Actually, it's a lot of people who've moved to the countryside, but in so doing, they value, and they've got attitudes which are alien to many. The grimy reality of leaving mud behind by your tractor wheels down a country lane, the tolling of church bells, whatever it is that gets their goat.
Yeah, absolutely, and yet we can. On the one hand, we don't want to portray a countryside which is so unwelcoming that people don't come here. Tourism is after all the second biggest business in the countryside, and it's critical to the rural economy. But on the other, we do have to be realistic, and that's why programmes like, I think, Autumnwatch and Springwatch particularly annoy a lot of people in the countryside, because they deny the reality of our lives on a day-to-day basis. It's this anthropomorphism. It's the idea that everything is happy and nothing ever dies, and there's probably old people's home for foxes, as you say. And we do have to face reality. And when we have a Director General of the BBC who said straightforwardly that if you want to be an outspoken campaigner on social media, you shouldn't be working for the BBC, and yet my members, people across the countryside, see a presenter who is one of the most famous presenters on the BBC, who will actively campaign against their interests, against everything they believe in, on a day-to-day basis. They really ask the question: do we not count? Is this a minority that doesn't exist? Is this the rural minority is the one minority which doesn't have any rights? And it's I think it's a sad thing that the BBC's lost touch with the countryside in the way it has. And personally, having worked with BBC journalists and I hope done some really positive stuff over the years, it pains me that so many rural people are becoming so detached from our national broadcaster.
Yeah. Tim, nobody cares what Chris Packham or people like him have to say about the countryside. Just don't make us pay a BBC licence fee on pain of criminalisation, because we can't show that we disagree with him in any other way than removing our patronage, and the BBC licence fee does not allow us to do that. It's a separate story. Tim, thanks for your story today in the survey. Thanks very much indeed. Tim Bonner there.
Thank you.
From the Countryside Alliance. Well, in response,